I would like to now introduce Mr. Lawry Scandar. He is a co-founder, but he's also the CEO of the Osiris Group. He's a master coach and psychologist. He's very energetic, a very powerfully engaging facilitator who leads people to remember and feel their passions and aspirations to live and work well. Lawry cherishes the richness of personal history and diversity people bring to their everyday work and off-the-job development programs. As a coach, therapist, consultant, and facilitator, Lawry draws on his background and experience in large-scale public and private sector change projects, industrial, community, and private sector practice psychology. His work spans over 25 years of industrial experience in both large and small organizations. So, Lawry, welcome, and I look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Vishnu, and thanks for the opportunity to be chatting to all of you who've joined us this morning or this evening, depending on where you are. Yeah, thank you for making me 10 years or so younger. It's about 35 years. Well, what's happened here? You're suddenly seeing something you don't want to see, are you? There we go. The one thing that really drives me, and that I guess I get quite passionate about with where AccuMatch fits, is that I'm driven by understanding what happens in the most incredible computer known to mankind, and that is our brain, which drives our behavior. And we've got one of the rarest opportunities in business life at the moment, one of the rarest opportunities that any of us have had the opportunity to take advantage of, and that's COVID-19. And I know a lot of people will say we've been through a lot of other things as well that have affected business, but this is quite significant. And a question I'd like to ask all of you who are either coaches or business owners or executives in business, and that is, this is the opportunity to create some shift and some change in your business. And I would ask you just to consider, what environment do you need in your business now to support sustained new behaviors, new beliefs, new practices, new habits, until that becomes the new norm? Because just by defining them up front, that's not going to make them the new norm. And I'd just like to talk to you very briefly about why that is. When you make changes in an organization, even if that is just a one-person operation, that does not necessarily translate to you and others make the transition towards those changes. That's an emotional buy-in. And what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about why this happens at an environmental level within your company, and how the AccuMatch behaviors help you understand what is going to work for you and what's going to work against you as we do this. So, brain, most powerful computer known to humanity. We're coming out of lockdown. So for a lot of people, we've been shut down. I've actually rather enjoyed it, to be honest, the peace and quiet to get on with things. But what's happening now is that it's allowed a lot of people in business to consider, I wonder what we can do that is different, that is innovative. What have we learned from this? And to translate that into action means you need to create a shift in your mindset. This is key, but this is also what happens. There's a fellow called William Bridges who's got a beautiful, elegant model of people working through transition. I love it. He talks about three main phases that whenever change is imposed, either via a COVID-19 or an economic situation or just an organizational decision, how do you bring people's hearts and minds on board with the change? How do you bring people on board so they become a part of whatever the new norm or new normal is going to become? And he talks about three main phases that we work through. First is the endings. At some point, there is a need to signal clearly what must stop. If we are to move forward with any innovations, any new practices, any new ways of doing our business, there are some rules, some beliefs, some behaviors and practices that no longer align. So there must be an ending to them. And with every ending comes for people a sense of loss. Oh, I used to be a real expert pre-COVID days, but this is new, this is different. Maybe I'm not going to be good enough. You know, maybe I was highly regarded in my industry, and now suddenly I'm just part of the morass of people who are struggling to create, you know, a new look for my business, and I've lost my sense of status. So endings come about in an emotional way and in a practical way. Then he talks about what often happens is that when people start to come back, as we are now coming out of lockdown, we come back to, they call new normal, but what's in reality happening is a lot of people are still expecting pre-COVID normal to simply return, status quo, and there's a reason for that, which I'll talk about in a moment. But this is the time for what he calls the neutral zone, the transition process, where people are unsure about, well, we can't do what was in the old way, but we don't quite know what the new is just yet. So what do we do in this weird space of, yeah, there are some things we can do, but there are some things that we've said, no, doesn't align anymore. Without the new rules of engagement, we need an environment that allows some creativity, some innovation, some experimentation, most likely within certain parameters, certain safety and procedural and regulatory parameters. But we are now in the most incredible opportunity phase for business, which is transition. How do we create the so-called new norms of our business when we don't quite know what they are? Is we have to play sensibly. We have to allow people to engage in experimenting with new ways of doing things and then working out how is that creating the shift that our business requires. And at this point, people start to get quite energetic about it, but also quite fearful, because it's like, I don't know what this new world is. I was really comfortable 3 months ago, and now it's like, oh my God. But out of this process comes the new beginnings. Hey, look, we've tried a few things and that's working. Great, let's keep that going. That's working, but not quite enough. Let's tweak it a little bit. That's not working. Let's find something different. So does your environment, and do you as a business owner, a business manager and leader, do you create the environment to allow that sort of innovation and experimentation to take place, as well as giving people the space to try new things, to maybe fail a little bit and learn, but also to not go back to previous practices that are simply going to signal no change. That's really important. Now, next step, this is what happens. It all happens in the brain. And this is why. Hypothalamus. I'm not going to give you a neurology lesson here, which I am apt to do, and the people online here will know I love this area. But essentially, there's a part of our brain that operates as a regulator, like a thermostat. Everything in our life we have learned to do within a range. So you can see in the slide there, we have days where good things happen. We have days where bad things happen. We have better days. We have worse days. We have successful days. We have failures. We have happy days, sad. Everything happens within a range. And in that range, we start to automate. Our brain says, hey, life has got good and bad stuff. So how about, because the brain has two key priorities. One is survival, the other is energy conservation. How about if you keep repeating life within this range, we lock that in as your range of what life should be. This is how life should be. And what happens is that we operate in an unconscious way. We have better, good, worse days. Fine. When something happens that takes us way out of that range, every cell and fiber in our body, every part of our brain wants us to come right back like a thermostat. Hey, it's too hot, need to cool you down. Hey, you're too cool, need to warm you up again. So why is this a challenge? This is a challenge because in the absence of an environment and a behavioral environment and a leadership environment in your organization, in the absence of an environment that allows people to either extend that range of behaviors as acceptable or to shift it up, what will happen is people will revert back to their old ways, always. We will always adapt dependent on what our environment allows us to adapt to. So the key here is Are we going to allow people to adapt with new way of thinking or an old way of thinking? And both will give you different results. Where the map fits in really beautifully, AccuMatch allows a leader and your people can include your clients and some of your suppliers, so not necessarily employees, is it allows you to get some sense of what is the environment that we are now in and what are the behaviors that best lend themselves to us creating this new norm for us. Am I involving others in my decision making, or am I very self-focused? Am I is my acceptance time frame of things, you must prove yourself to me, or am I allowing people to get things right and play with it for a while? Am I global in my thinking? Am I future focused, or am I very much working away from things or towards? So a number of aspects of the map we can start to see lend themselves more readily to being able to work with an environment that is conducive to shift and change in a way that the brain will say, I can get on board with this. I can make this transition. It's a leadership environment in so many ways, one that we've not really had to this extent for many, many, many decades. And I think it's fantastic. Remembering that we all bring that homeostasis, that range that we operate, we all bring that into our lives and into our workplace, but we're not stuck with it. It is around how do we modify our environment to allow us to go further? How do we get the brain really buzzing? And I think this is really critical. Let me just get rid of that for a minute. I think what's very critical for us is to recognize that behaviors are one thing, driven by a lot of needs. The primary one is to feel good, to feel safe. That is to be within our homeostatic range, a thermostat. The key is to create an environment where we learn to be in control of that governor, that thermostat, so it's not controlling us. You as a business owner, you, your employees, and their behavior. The map gives pinpoint accuracy direction around what are some of the behaviors that are more or less conducive to creating that environment. So that's the key thing I wanted to leave you with. And the question is about, again, what is the environment that you believe you require to support sustained behavior change and practice until it becomes the new norm, until that set of behaviors and practices becomes the new range. Leave you with that, and I'll look forward to any questions that you might have in the group later. Vishnu and everybody, thank you for listening to me rave on about the brain.
Thank you very much, Lawry. And it's really key that we have a choice of being either a thermostat or a thermometer, because the thermometer just goes with whatever happens in the environment, whereas as a thermostat, you really get to set what you want the environment to be like. So thank you very much, Lawry. And Lawry is from Australia, so it's a truly international panel this evening. We've had Bruce from New Zealand, Lawry from Australia,